Wrong love. On the day I completed the divorce procedures, I booked a high-speed rail ticket back to my hometown. My mobile phone, ID card, and bank card with a small balance are all I have had over the years. The housekeeper called me and said that I still had some items that I hadn't moved away. Throw them all away. I don't want them anymore. He also said that the young master was clamoring to find his mother. He will soon have a new mother. The one he has been thinking about all the time. My son is really like his father. Even the woman he loves is the same. I used to be sad. Why can't that person be me? Now I think, if you don't love, then don't love. That's it. Before the high-speed train started, I said the last sentence to the other end of the phone. Let him rest assured. I will never bother him again in my life. After saying the last sentence, I turned off the phone and changed the card. From then on, this city had nothing to do with me. Sitting next to me was a little girl about the same age as my son, with round eyes, looking at me warily. I used to like children very much. But now, I don't like anything. The little girl didn't make any noise and was very quiet all the way. Her parents, on the other hand, kept talking on the phone loudly and swearing. I simply put on my headphones and took a nap with my eyes closed. After a while, someone carefully pulled my sleeve. I opened my eyes and looked at her. The little girl pursed her lips. Auntie, my mother is missing. Can you help me find her? The three-seater seat near the corridor was empty at the moment. I didn't know what happened. So I called the attendant and the police to come over immediately. After some investigation, I found that the little girl's mother got off the bus halfway. Before getting off the bus, she looked back vigilantly while walking, fearing that the little girl would follow her. In other words, the little girl was abandoned. The carriage was full of noise, all of which were the voices of passengers' discussions. They had no scruples. In front of the little girl, they said that her mother was really heartless and that she was really pitiful. The little girl always sat quietly in her seat, motionless, not crying or making a fuss. I thought about it, showed my ID to the conductor, and left my home address and contact information. So when I got off the high-speed train, in addition to my mobile phone, ID card, and bank card with a small balance, I also had another child. I officially settled in my hometown. I reorganized the deserted little yard and planted fruits and vegetables. I framed the portrait of my grandmother and hung it in the center of the living room. I named the little girl Smiley. I went through the procedures and got my household registration. From then on, my household registration book was finally no longer a lonely page. Smiley didn't like to laugh at all, always had a stern face, and looked at me seriously. She knew everything, and she was very mature at a young age. She was only 4 years old, but when I was sick, she would stand on a stool to make porridge for me. I thought of my biological child, the young master of the Zhang family, Zachary, who wanted to ski, would receive a whole ski resort as a gift, and who wanted to eat candy, would receive a whole candy factory as a gift. They are so different. Smiley asked me why I adopted her. She was just a burden. I touched her head and replied, because I am very lonely. So can you accompany me in the future? She looked at me, was silent for a long time, and nodded vigorously. Okay. I will accompany you for the rest of my life. For the days passed one by one. Smiley went to kindergarten. Smiley went to elementary school. Smiley became the class monitor. Smiley had a fight with someone. I was very surprised when I received the call from the teacher. Smiley is a well-behaved and obedient child, and her temperament is very precocious. Not to mention fighting with classmates. She doesn't even want to give those children an extra look. In her words, it's too childish. I hurried to school. The teacher came to the school gate to greet me, and when he saw me, he also looked helpless. The child who fought with Smiley is a transfer student who just came today. Why did they fight? I just wanted to know this. When the teacher heard this, He looked at me with a slightly strange look. What? Little Zachary said that Smiley wanted to steal his mother. What did you say? I stopped. There is a photo of you and her in Smiley's pencil case. The teacher said. This photo was seen by Zachary. And he said Smiley was shameless and stole his mother. I stopped talking and just followed the teacher's footsteps in silence. Arriving at the office, the door opened, and the teacher looked back at me. By the way, Zachary's father is here. I stood at the door of the office and first glanced at Smiley, who was sitting in the corner doing her homework quietly. Seeing that she was in a good mood, I breathed a sigh of relief. In the corner of my eye, the little boy who was losing his temper saw me. His eyes lit up, and he ran towards me with his short legs. Mom! I bent down and caught Zachary. I didn't hug him, but gently pushed him away. Little friend, you've come to the wrong place. I smiled slightly, raised my eyes, and met the man's gaze in the room. Hello, sir. I'm Smiley's mother. I didn't think I would meet Jonathan again. The world is big, and people you don't want to meet will naturally never meet again. Smiley held the pen tightly, and I knew she was a little annoyed. Jonathan stared at me without saying a word. Zachary cried loudly, accusing me of not wanting him while crying. I knew he was waiting for my reaction. Smiley. I helped Smiley pack her school bag. Can you go back first? Smiley nodded very straightforwardly, picked up her school bag and left without looking back. As soon as she left, Zachary wiped away his tears, ran over again, and hugged my calves. Mom, don't be angry, okay? I know I was wrong. I bent down and touched his head with a smile. Then I looked up at Jonathan. Mr. Jong, can we talk alone? The past between Jonathan and me is really unremarkable, and not worth mentioning. When my grandmother was young, she was kind to the Jong family. It is said that she saved Jonathan's grandmother who was kidnapped at the time. Therefore, the Jong family always sent some gifts during the holidays. After I was admitted to university, my grandmother was old and it was difficult to toss. She was also worried that I would be alone and would not adapt to the pace of the big city. So I contacted the Jong family and asked them to take care of me. That year, I came out of the train station with my luggage and saw Jonathan leaning against the car, playing with his phone carelessly. He was so dazzling that I wanted to pile all the beautiful words I had learned on him. It was normal to be attracted to him. I knew that he and I were not from the same world, and I didn't think about anything else. The moon was hanging high in the sky, and I was satisfied to be sprinkled with moonlight when I passed by. Jonathan and I were in the same university, and he would occasionally bring me some items on behalf of his elders. After a few visits, we were considered nodding acquaintances. Later, I heard about the love story of Jonathan and his childhood sweetheart. The love of the protagonists is always lingering. They are constantly sweet, quarreling, breaking up, and reconciling. I was a spectator, and occasionally lost. In my junior year, I started my internship. Because the company was far away from the school, I had to travel back and forth for a long time every day. I ran into Jonathan once and he casually asked me about my recent situation. And I told him the truth. Not long after, I received a call from Jonathan's grandmother. She said that there was an empty house in her family, very close to my company, and asked me to move in directly. The kindness of the elderly is always not to be refused, and I am very grateful. After moving in, I found that the house was full of traces of Jonathan's life. I felt that my mind was not pure, so I could only put all my belongings in the guest room to minimize the traces of my existence. Until that night, I came home from overtime and found Jonathan drunk and fainted on the sofa. I wanted to avoid suspicion, but I was worried that he would catch a cold. So I took an air-conditioned quilt to cover him. Jonathan opened his eyes and looked at me. I thought he was going to ask me why I was in his house. But in fact, he overwhelmed me and eventually made a big mistake. 7 now. In fact, I don't remember the chaos of that night very much. The human body has a self-protection mechanism. Sometimes it feels too painful, and will gradually forget. So far in my life, I have only done that kind of thing with one person once. He called me by another name. Thinking about it, it seems that Jonathan has only called me once so far. On the day we first met, at the entrance of the train station, he looked me up and down. Lindsay, I am. If life could only be like the first time we met. Why would the autumn wind make the fan sad? At the campus was silent after school. Jonathan and I stood at the end of the corridor, with a vibrant green behind us. Don't you want to talk to me alone? Jonathan asked me. Just say whatever you want to say. Since he started talking like this, I didn't hesitate. What have you said to Zachary in the past few years? What? We have been divorced for 4 years. In these 4 years, I have kept my promise and never showed up again. I have also deposited the child support to your card on time every month. Children's memories are very short. And Zachary didn't like me as his biological mother before. If no one kept reminding him in his ear, he wouldn't have remembered me. Or even had feelings for me. Jonathan turned his head away from me. I didn't say anything to him. It was my grandmother who kept reminding him. Then why did you transfer to another school? He kept clamoring to come to you. Jonathan paused. I couldn't stop him. Yes. Zachary is the apple of everyone's eye in the Zhang family's eyes. What he wants, he must get. I lowered my eyelids and thought quietly. Even Jonathan has no principles in front of Zachary. After a long while, she smiled and said, it doesn't matter. When his expectations are dashed, he will naturally want to go back. I have never been a likable person. When Zachary and I get along for a long time, he will naturally find that it is his memory that constantly beautifies me. In fact, I am still the unlikable, annoying, and only lowering his status. His biological mother. 9 After I returned to my hometown, I opened a small restaurant to make a living. Because I couldn't handle it alone, I limited the number of guests. Slowly, it became famous and became a popular restaurant among tourists. At the age of 18, Lindsay wanted to be a strong woman with an annual income of 1 million yuan, and she studied computer science, which is easy to make money. At the age of 28, Lindsay just wanted to guard the store of less than 100 square meters and live the rest of her life quietly. Since Zachary transferred to my school, he would be sent to my store by the driver every day after school. He is a smart kid, and he only showed his willfulness on the first day he met me again. Jonathan rarely appeared, and most of the time, the person who accompanied Zachary was the driver. I don't know what the Zhang family thinks, since they value Zachary so much. How can they feel at ease to leave him alone in this remote town? I didn't drive him away. He is the only relative left in the world who is related to me by blood. I once stayed up all night for 3 days and 3 nights to take care of him with a high fever. I once cut my hands to make toys for him. I have to admit that people are selfish. When I did these things for him, I didn't want anything in return. But after all my efforts, I only got his disdain, disgust and disgust, which made me a little sad. When he was very young, he was also attached to me. He had to be with me when he slept and held me when he went out. I relied on his dependence on me to survive the countless cold stares and grievances I received in the Zhang family. But when he began to have his own consciousness, learned to walk, and learned to say no, he slowly stopped liking me. Because I would stop him when he ate too much candy. And I would seriously educate him when he was willful. Children don't know right from wrong, good from evil, and only know that I often shackled him. So naturally they don't want to get close to me anymore. Until that day, Jonathan took him out for a walk. And after returning home, Zachary said confidently, I don't want you to be my mother anymore. I want Aunt Chloe to be my mother. You don't deserve to be my mother. Get out. This is my home. Smiley asked me privately if she could stop being friends with Zachary. Because she didn't like him. Of course. I didn't care about it. But it was still a little strange. Why don't you like him? Smiley is a generous child. She rarely expresses her dislike for another person clearly. Most of the time she is indifferent. He hurt you. Smiley's tone was calm. You are sad every time you see him. I was stunned. He knows you're sad. But he still keeps showing up in front of you. Smiley said, lowering her head. A little depressed. Can I beat him up? I can't beat that adult yet. I can only beat Zachary. Smiley thought for a while. Mom, can you send me to learn martial arts? I'll be very good. Mom, I'll protect you. I promised to send Smiley to learn martial arts. She studied very hard. The master said, your Smiley can endure more hardships than many older children. I remembered Jonathan once pointed at my nose and taunted me. Who would love a woman like you? No, Jonathan. Grandma loves me. Smiley loves me too. Now, I love myself too. 11 Jonathan occasionally appears. Every time he comes in a dusty manner. Sits in my store for a while. Orders 2 dishes. Eats. And then takes Zachary home. Neighbors are asking if Jonathan is pursuing me. They don't know Jonathan is my ex-husband. They only know that there is a rich bachelor pursuing me. A divorced middle-aged woman with children. I always deny with a smile. He is not blind. How could he be interested in me? He is here to pick up the children. Not to pursue me. If it were in the past, I would guess what the purpose behind Jonathan's behavior was. But now, I have no curiosity about him at all. I don't care whether he comes or leaves. 12 I sometimes wonder when Zachary will get tired of playing this boring game of pleasing his mother. He has been in this small town with no aquarium, no amusement park, and no big shopping mall for almost 3 months. Maybe, what you can't get is precious, is deeply hidden in everyone's bones. Even children are not immune. The colder I am to him, the more he wants to get close to me. He often has a lonely expression on his face. When I gently hold Smiley's hand. When I bend down to adjust Smiley's skirt. When I mysteriously brought out the small dessert specially prepared for Smiley from the kitchen. But every time I looked at him, he would sweep away his loneliness and smile sweetly at me. People's preferences always change with their feelings. When I loved this child, I would feel uncomfortable for a long time if he was slightly touched. But now, even if I know that he is pretending to be strong, I don't feel anything. I even would think, why doesn't he leave? It's really annoying that he stays here. I don't hate him. I just don't like him anymore. 13 Early summer has arrived. And after the graduation ceremony, the summer vacation officially begins. That day I opened the store as usual. And Zachary didn't appear until I closed it at night. I just thought he was finally tired of the boring game and planned to return to his own identity and be a rich young master. When I returned home in the evening, I found him holding a delicate cake box and sitting obediently on the steps at the entrance of the courtyard. Jonathan also accompanied him. There were also several gift bags beside them. The outstanding looks of the father and son attracted the amazing glances of passers-by. But they only focused on what was in front of them. Dad. When will Mom come back? Soon. We specially celebrated her birthday with her and prepared so many gifts. Will Mom be happy? She will. Hearing this, Zachary pursed his lips and showed an expectant smile on his face. He was wearing a very formal small suit and dressed up specially. But the weather was hot and humid. And he might have waited too long. And there was a little sweat on his forehead. Or maybe he was not hot. But just a little excited. I stopped not far away. Smiley did not stop at all. And walked straight to the father and son. And said crisply, "You are wrong. Mom's birthday is not today. You are talking nonsense." Zachary rarely confronted Smiley directly anymore. He knew that I loved Xiaoxiao and didn't want to offend me. So he usually tried to avoid getting along with Smiley. But at this time, he stood up fiercely and retorted loudly, "Mom's birthday is today. She and I have the same birthday. I won't make a mistake." Jonathan saw me and stood up as well. He didn't say anything, but there was a hint of expectation on his face. Lindsay. He called my name. Awkwardly. Happy birthday. I walked over, took out the key, unlocked the yard, and looked at him calmly. I forgot to tell you that I have changed my birthday now. After thinking about it, I said again, but this kind of trivial matter should have nothing to do with you. 14. I used to like to celebrate my birthday very much. My grandmother is a little old lady with a special sense of ritual. Every year on my birthday, she would prepare a large table of food, a beautiful cake, and an exquisite gift for me. There are only me and her at home, but it is not lonely. She is in poor health and cannot travel long distances. But after I went to college, I couldn't celebrate my birthday at home. Every year at this time, she must fly thousands of miles to the city, where I am to accompany me to blow out candles and eat cake. When my grandmother was alive, I was never lonely. On my birthday that year, my grandmother flew over to accompany me as usual. At that time, I was pregnant with Zachary and was already in the 3rd trimester. I was afraid that my grandmother would worry. So I hid all the discomfort during my pregnancy from her and lied to her, saying that Jonathan was very caring to me. Under the eaves, he just treated me as a transparent person. But in fact, Jonathan would not look at me straight in the eye most of the time. I lived in the same house with him. I could understand him at that time. A night I spent with him was a mistake. I even thought at the beginning that Jonathan was drunk anyway, and I would sneak away after everything was over. As long as I didn't say anything, no one else in the world would know what happened. But the actual situation was that Jonathan kept torturing me all night. Before I recovered my strength to leave, the door was opened by Jonathan's grandmother, who came to visit me. She understood that I had been working overtime for many days and brought me chicken soup. So, things started to run wild like a wild horse. And there was no turning back. Jonathan's grandmother was not interested in the love tug of war of young people. She only knew that Jonathan had ruined my innocence and must be responsible. As for whether Jonathan has a lover, whether the John family is satisfied with me as a daughter-in-law, and whether I am willing to marry Jonathan, she doesn't care at all. She only cares that she can't let me down, let alone my grandmother. Lindsay, I have already told your grandmother about you and Jonathan. She is not in good health. And you have done it. You don't want her to worry about you, right? I can see that you are not without feelings for Jonathan. You are a good child. And I know you don't want to destroy the relationship between Jonathan and Chloe. But the matter is that Chloe can't tolerate any sand in her eyes. And there is no possibility for her and Jonathan. But you and Jonathan, there are still infinite possibilities. Don't you want to try? I have to admit that I was moved for a moment. However, before I made a choice, I found out that I was pregnant. The reaction was very strong. The kind that could not be concealed at all. So, I had no way out. I could only bite the bullet, endure Jonathan's disgusted eyes, and start a marriage that was destined to be unhappy. Sometimes I hate my own compromise in my bones. I had to pretend to be happy and sweet in front of the elders. And I had to pretend to be indifferent in front of Jonathan. But in fact, I was not happy. I was in pain. Morning sickness was painful. Edema was painful. Cramps were painful. Being disliked by the Zhang family was painful. Being hated by Jonathan was painful. And being ridiculed by Chloe was painful. I endured and welcomed another birthday of my own. Grandma was very happy. She not only prepared gifts for me, but also prepared gifts for her future grandson. She said that she would not leave for the time being after she came this time. And she would not be at ease until I had given birth and finished the confinement. But Grandma did not seize Zachary's birth. On my birthday, I took Grandma out for dinner. She saw Chloe and Jonathan holding hands intimately and kissing sweetly. Then she had a heart attack and was admitted to the hospital. 15. My resentment towards Jonathan probably started from that time. Obviously, I was not the one who made the mistake. And I was obviously the biggest victim. Why did all Jonathan's grandmothers slap Jonathan hard in front of me? I have to bear all the bitter fruits? My grandma went to the emergency room as soon as she was sent to the hospital. Soon, the Zhang family also came. But I didn't want to stop it. I just looked at the operating room expectantly, hoping that the doctor would bring me good news. The doctor came out and said regretfully that I should hurry up and say goodbye to the old man. How ridiculous. Say goodbye. My grandma, an hour ago, was still smiling and holding my hand, saying that she made soft clothes for her good grandson with her own hands. Now, she wants me to say goodbye? Jonathan's grandma cried miserably, saying sorry to me and grandma. I couldn't hear anything. I could only hold grandma's hand tightly, afraid that if I let go, I would never touch her again. I know you are not happy at all after getting married. You just don't want me to worry. So you don't say anything. Grandma was lying on the hospital bed, looking at me distressed. I'm sorry, Lindsay. Grandma can't accompany you in the future. She cried painfully and choked. Lindsay, what should I do? What if someone bullies you in the future? What if no one treats you well? Who can I entrust you to? Good sister. Don't worry. I will definitely treat Lindsay well. Jonathan's grandmother swore in tears and pulled Jonathan to make a statement. Jonathan also squatted beside the bed and said to Grandma, Grandma, don't worry. I will take good care of her in the future. The thing I regret most in my life is that I asked you to take care of her. She pulled my hand, and her eyes were full of reluctance to let me go. Grandma looked at him with turbid eyes and smiled sadly. But she left after all. She left with reluctance, regret, and deep regret. I held my aching belly, screamed in despair in the operating room for most of the night, and gave birth to Zachary. Jonathan may have felt guilty about me. After Grandma passed away, he rarely met with Chloe and often helped take care of the child. Although he still didn't talk much with me, at least he treated me with respect. Chloe went abroad because of emotional pain and rarely contacted Jonathan. I thought that my life would be like this. I was in an unhappy marriage, with a husband who didn't love me, and a lovely son. But Chloe came back, and as soon as she came back, she took away all the attention of Jonathan and Zachary. Chloe took away all the family affection that I might have had and the love that I never got without hesitation. On Zachary's birthday, she said she had prepared a grand surprise for Zachary. So Zachary left me without hesitation and ran to her. Jonathan said that Chloe still didn't like me, so she didn't take me with her. Before sunset, he would bring Zachary back to celebrate my birthday with me. But that day, they didn't come back until the early morning. Jonathan called and said that Zachary was too tired to play and fell asleep. He didn't want to wake Zachary up, so he rested outside. In the silent night, I sat in front of the window for a long time. I remembered that before my grandmother died, she held my hand and said sadly, "What if no one treats me well in the future? Grandma, I don't like celebrating my birthday anymore." 16 Out of politeness, I let the father and son into the house and poured them some water. Smiley took the calendar from the cabinet and pointed to a date circled in red. "This is Mom's birthday." Zachary looked at me anxiously, his eyes wet, wanting to speak but not daring. They are really alike. From their looks to their words and deeds, they are exactly the same. I probably just had a belly, so there is nothing similar about Zachary. Jonathan piled the gifts in an empty corner. I was negligent this time. Next time. You don't have to prepare these." I interrupted him. "Next time. You don't have to come again." Jonathan turned his back to me, his body stiff. And after a long while, he turned around. "Sorry. Can I talk to you alone?" It's so rare that this sentence would come out of his mouth. I mixed a sweet drink for the two little guys, turned on the TV, and tuned it to the children's channel, and then took Jonathan to the pavilion in the yard. "It's beautiful here." Jonathan was a little restrained in his movements. "Thank you for the compliment." I asked him straight to the point. If you have something to say, please speak directly. I see that there is no other man around you at the moment. Jonathan said. If you don't mind, can you remarry me? I stared at him. Silent. Jonathan looked away in embarrassment. I just think that we should give the child a complete family. Zachary's temperament has changed a lot recently. He is not as willful and spoiled as before. So, didn't you marry Miss Chloe? Jonathan was stunned. Back then, everyone told me that she was the wife who matched you. Zachary's mother. Although you didn't say this to me directly, I think you should agree. So I took the initiative to vacate the seat. What? Didn't you end up together? Jonathan couldn't stand my gaze. And his hands unconsciously clenched and unclenched. That's all in the past. You and I are also in the past. But we have a child. So what? Jonathan. Don't use others as an excuse. It used to be Chloe. And now it's Zachary. I smiled and whispered. Is it so difficult to admit that you have feelings for me? 17 I used to wonder how unpresentable I was in Jonathan's eyes that made him so ashamed to admit it. It is really hard to hide the love for something like this. Just like I never said I loved Jonathan. But my red ears and rapid heartbeat had already exposed me. Although I have a bit of a people-pleasing personality. If he had never given me a glimmer of hope, I would not have lasted for 4 years. My marriage with Jonathan lasted for 4 years. When did he start to like me? And how much did he like me? I don't know. I just inherited the habit of my grandmother's generation. If something is not good, the first reaction is not to throw it away and replace it, but to mend it and try to use it as much as possible. The same is true for marriage. I thought that Jonathan might not hate me so much. So if I work harder, will this marriage be better? I tried my best to discover his love for me from the clues. And then tried to gather these scattered love together, hoping that they can illuminate my way forward. Later, I illuminated the way forward. This road is rugged, bumpy, and full of stench that makes people physically uncomfortable. This love is not enough to keep me going, nor can it bring me any warmth. It only makes me understand more clearly how miserable this marriage is. I used to think that maybe you have a strong sense of morality, and cannot accept that you fall in love with another woman besides Chloe. Then I thought, if you really have such a strong sense of morality, how could you still be ambiguous with your first love after knowing that you are already married? In fact, you are just selfish. Even if you want to get back together with me, you have to use the excuse that Zachary misses me. But Jonathan, we have been divorced for 4 years. Jonathan swallowed hard and asked me in a hoarse voice. So, I am late, right? It's not too late. I sighed softly. It's just that all that has passed. Jonathan, look forward. Jonathan raised his hand and covered his eyes. I know his pride. Seeing him in such a mess, I didn't feel refreshed. So I quietly got up and left this little world to him. Before leaving, he reached out and grabbed the hem of my skirt. Very hard. Knuckles turned white. Veins bulged. He had lost a lot of weight. And there was a kind of decadence that could not be hidden. I heard his suppressed sobs and saw his trembling shoulders. Don't come again in the future. I said. Go back to your own circle of life. And take Zhang's Ilan with you. I pulled back the hem of my skirt and smoothed it. I forgot to tell you that my birthday now is the anniversary of my divorce from you. That day was also the day I picked up Smiley. She didn't know her birthday. And I wanted to change her birthday. So we decided together to treat that day as a new life. Just think of it as your birthday gift to me in advance. Give me some peace and quiet. Jonathan. Thank you. A teen Jonathan left, taking Zachary with him. He didn't say anything, but Zachary guessed it. Before leaving, he hugged my legs tightly and refused to let go. He cried miserably. His voice was sharp and hoarse. His face was red, and he sobbed, as if he would faint in the next second. I won't leave. Let me go. I want my mother. He struggled desperately and begged me. Mom, please don't abandon me. Okay? I will be very good and obedient in the future. I will not make you sad again. Please don't send me away. Dad. You are a liar. You said that Mom would forgive me. Big liar. Big bad guy. Go away. Mom. The car door was slammed shut. I saw Zachary crying and clinging to the window, beating the window desperately, looking at me pitifully. Jonathan pulled him over, held him tightly, and ordered the driver in a deep voice, "Go." He didn't look at me again. From beginning to end. He never looked back. Smiley stood beside me, looking at me eagerly. "What's wrong?" I lowered my head and asked her gently. "They won't come again, right?" "Yeah. They won't." "Mom, are you sad?" I just smiled and rubbed her head. "Smiley. Everything will pass. Remember, no matter how painful it is, as long as you keep moving forward, do it in one go. And don't look back. You will always be able to get through it. I have already walked a long way forward. But Jonathan and the others seem to be still there. But it doesn't matter. We are not people on the same road. So there is no need to stop and wait for them." That night, I had a dream. In the dream, I went back to a few years ago when Zachary was just born. He brushed the hair in front of my forehead and gave me a gentle kiss. "Good night, wife." I was too tired to take care of him, so I fell asleep on the sofa without knowing it. At that time, I really thought that I could spend my whole life with him. In a daze. It was Jonathan who came home late from get off work, picked me up, went upstairs, and gently put me on the bed. Later, I realized that a lifetime is too long, and no one can accompany anyone to complete this life. He was a passerby in my life, a bold stroke in my peaceful life. But that's all. Jonathan, you and I have been together for a long time. Extra 1. After Jonathan and Lindsay divorced, the atmosphere in the Zhang family was very depressed for a long time. The woman who was not welcomed by everyone finally left. But the expected relief did not come. Jonathan has always been a man of few words, and he talked even less after the divorce. He was busy with work, either on a business trip or on the way to a business trip. Even if he went home, he would often fall asleep immediately. Zachary was heartless, running around with the nanny's hand all day long, and crying and making a fuss when he was not satisfied. But one day, he suddenly asked, "Where's Mom?" The nanny didn't know how to answer. Zachary was very proactive. He lay down under the table, in the closet, and in the garden, looking for a long time, but found nothing. "Huh? Where did Mom hide?" Children forget things. But Zachary is very smart. He can even clearly recall the scene of his last meeting with Lindsay. That morning, before Lindsay went out, she bent down with a smile and touched his head. "Zachary, Mom is leaving. I always hoped that you were a well-behaved and obedient child. But now I understand that you are different from me. You have the capital to be willful. In the days to come, be happy and joyful." At that time, Zachary did not take these words to heart. He was tired of Lindsay's preaching, and disliked Lindsay's control over him. But at this moment, when he thought of those words again, when he looked around the huge villa, he found that there was no longer Lindsay in any corner. He finally realized it and began to feel sad. That evening, Jonathan came home, and Zachary took the initiative to hold his hand for the first time. "Dad, did you quarrel with Mom?" Jonathan stopped and looked down at him. Zachary frowned on his childish face. "Can you take the initiative to apologize to Mom and make peace? I haven't seen her for a long time. I want to eat the sweet and sour pork ribs made by Mom. Can I have it tonight?" Jonathan looked at Zachary's face, expressionless at first, and then gradually a nasty smile emerged. "I didn't quarrel with her. I divorced her." Do you know what divorce is? Divorce means that she doesn't want you anymore. She won't see you again. No matter what you want to do. She won't care about you anymore. She abandoned you. Understand? He seemed to enjoy the fear on Zachary's face. And repeated it again, Zachary. She doesn't want you anymore. She will have other children in the future. Who are more obedient and lovely than you. You don't have any weight in her heart anymore. You lied. Mom won't abandon me. Zachary screamed. You are the one who was abandoned. Mom said, she lied to you. Jonathan laughed. Zachary. You've been lied to. Love you the most? Huh. You believe this nonsense? Jonathan. What nonsense are you talking to a child? The elder of the Zhang family rushed over, hugged the emotionally broken Zachary in his arms and coaxed him in a low voice. Zachary. Don't cry. Dad is teasing you. I want my mother. Mom has something to do recently. So she went back to her hometown. She will be back in a few days. Okay? No. 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 I want to see her now. Zachary struggled hard. Jonathan hated Zachary's willful appearance the most. He looked at Zachary crying infuriately, like an outsider watching, without a trace of emotion. Even when Zachary cried and almost vomited, he just frowned and turned to go upstairs. All the furnishings in the bedroom were exactly the same as before Lindsay left, including the huge wedding photo on the wall. Jonathan sometimes doesn't understand what he is thinking. When he broke up with Chloe, he blocked her, deleted her account, and threw away her tokens of love in one go. He wished that all the items related to her would disappear completely from his world. But when he divorced Lindsay, he didn't throw anything away. It seemed that if he threw it away, he would lose. He tried his best to keep himself emotionally stable to prove that Lindsay's departure had no effect on him. He thought that for a woman he didn't love, divorce was a relief for him. Half a year after divorcing Lindsay, Chloe took the initiative to ask him if he wanted to get married. Jonathan was silent for a while, and said, forget it. Zachary was still making a fuss about looking for her 2 days ago. If I marry you, he might lose his temper and make a scene. Chloe looked into his eyes and asked him, is it really just because of Zhang Zil and that you don't want to marry me? What else? Chloe smiled, with a hint of sarcasm. Jonathan, I admire you sometimes. After all, you even lie to yourself. Jonathan didn't understand. What did he lie to himself about? Extra 2 when Zachary was 18. Jonathan was still single. But Lindsay got married. She married a programmer who was shy and taciturn but treated her very well. Perhaps because of the love for her. The programmer also cared about Zachary, her stepson. On the wedding day, Zachary went to the wedding. After returning, at the dinner table, he took the initiative to mention it to Jonathan, saying that the atmosphere at the wedding was very good. There were not many guests, but it was very lively. Jonathan heard this and just chewed the food in his mouth silently, not even bothering to give a glance. This is the way the father and son always get along. There is not much affection and words between them. Just like a typical wealthy family. More politeness than intimacy. So Zachary didn't know that Jonathan also went to the wedding. Not only did he go, he also gave a red envelope. Inside was a bank card. Lindsay didn't want it. Keep it. I know you don't need it. But it's just a little gift from me. I can't give you anything else. Lindsay shook her head. You don't need to give me anything. She was wearing a simple dress. Not as grand as when she and Jonathan got married. But the smile on her face was much more real. Jonathan only took a glance and looked away. He was afraid that if he looked at her one more time, he would burst into tears and beg Lindsay to not get married and abandon him. The dressing room was very quiet. And someone knocked on the door. Is the bride ready? It's time to go on stage. Okay. Lindsay stood up and asked Jonathan. Zachary is outside too. How about having dinner together before leaving? No. Jonathan shook his head, stood up, and walked to the door first, holding the door handle. Jonathan suddenly said, by the way, there are some things I haven't told you. Huh? I used to be jealous of Zachary and Grandma. Lindsay was surprised. What did you say? Everyone says you love me terribly. But I always feel that in your heart. Grandma is more important than me. Jonathan's tone was calm. So I was not very happy. Then Zachary was born. No matter what you and I did. As long as Zachary cried. You no longer had me in your eyes. Jonathan said. So. I have always hated Zachary. It's a pity that I don't have such good luck. Maybe I subconsciously always want to occupy all your attention. Jonathan smiled self-deprecatingly. So I lost everything I originally had. Also, I didn't have sex after drinking. I was sober that night. Jonathan finally turned around and looked at Lindsay. If you are unhappy in the future, feel free to find me. But if you are happy, don't tell me. You know, I'm not a good person. Seeing your happiness is not for me. I actually want to destroy it. Jonathan actually knew it, from the first day the programmer appeared beside Lindsay. The desire to destroy in his heart instantly broke through the cage. He was like an ugly reptile, glaring in the dark, planning to destroy Lindsay's sack and spring. But Lindsay smiled so beautifully. She looked so happy. Not witnessing Lindsay and the programmer's wedding with his own eyes is the greatest blessing Jonathan can give. Is it sad? Sad. Is it regretful? Regretful. But no matter how sad or regretful it is, in this life, he and Lindsay can only end here. Jonathan remembered that year. He and the first meeting with Lindsay. He was sent by his grandmother to pick up the bumpkin from the countryside. And he was actually very reluctant. The second before he saw Lindsay, he was still complaining to his friends on the phone. But he looked up. And the moment he saw Lindsay, he almost stopped breathing. She was like a cool breeze, sweeping away all the heat of midsummer, leaving only the cicadas on the branches and the scattered sunlight between the treetops. The throbbing was a moment. He did many things that he himself could not understand. In every gap in life, his eyes were unconsciously staying on her. When he came to his senses, there was no turning back between them. He watched the sunshine on her body become less and less, and the shadow became bigger and bigger. At that time, he really believed that she would stay with him forever. In a daze, Jonathan seemed to be dreaming. In the dream, he returned to the day of their wedding, and the MC held up the microphone and asked him, for rich or poor, sick or healthy, Mr. Jonathan, are you willing to marry Miss Lindsay? He heard his own answer. I do.